An innocent piece of software has been executed can be. The probability of error increases with every execution, and as illustrated by several dramatic pre-execution releases, the risk of failure error is much greater for poor or minority defendants. For majority of firms like adequate legal representation. Since 1977 around, more than 70 condemned prisoners has been released due to credible crimes or innocence, and over 500 executions since 1997. Innocence and wrong conviction have required the release of the wrong person ever executed, rather than those for instance discovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 93% executed were innocent. Capital punishment is no excuse for the crime. Taxpayer in Texas are spending an average of $2.2 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800 to $1 million. The bottom line is that the net capital punishment take away research for other community interests, such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victim of the violent crime and family. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right sentence, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right sequence for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. An innocent person has been executed. The probability of error increases with every execution, and, as illustrated by several dramatic pre-execution releases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor or minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned prisoners have been released due to credible claims of innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocence and wrongful convictions have required the release of one person for every seven executed. One of those who is executed discovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an inexpensive way to deal with taxpayer and tax support. Incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that many of those spent on capital punishment takes away resources for other community interests such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has different sympathy for victims of violent crime. Acknowledge their relief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. An innocent person who has been executed can never be brought back to life. The probability of error increases with every execution, and, as illustrated by several dramatic execution releases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor and minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1997 alone, More than 70 condemned prisoners have been released due to credible claims of innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocence and wrongful conviction have required the release of one person for every seven executed. What if the proved innocence, guilt, in this case, theologically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an expected way to deal with the problem. Taxpayers in Texas are spending an average $2.1 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that a million of dollars spent on capital punishment takes away resources for other community interests, such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has raised sympathy for the victims of the violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to ever acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under these circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. An innocent person who has been executed can be never brought back to life. Can probability equal with every execution, and as illustrated by several dramatic pre-execution releases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor and minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned citizens have been released due to credible claim of innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocent and wrongful every seven executed. What was thought for the impact of this global tragically strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an unexpected way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Spent average of $2.3 million on execution. Lifetime consideration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that a million of the dollars spent on capital punishment takes away resources on other community interests, such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. Condemned prisoners. Mm. An innocent person who has been executed can be never be brought back to life. The probability of error increases with execution, and as the innocent with several multiple execution releases, the risk of further error is much greater for poor and minority defendants. The majority of them lack adequate representation. Since 1977 alone, over 70 condemned prisoners have been released due to credible claims of innocence, and of the five executions since 1987, innocence and wrongful conviction held one person for every seven executed. What of those for instance guilt discovery? Geologically strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. An innocent, an innocent person, an innocent person, an innocent person who has been executed can never be brought back to life. The probability of error increases with every execution, and, as illustrated by several dramatic pre-execution releases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor and minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned prisoners have been released due to credible claim of innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocence and wrongful convictions were prior to the release of one person for every seven executed. What of the further innocence cases discovered? Logically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23% executed were innocent, in- including every execution, and they can never be brought back to life. The probability of error increases with every execution, and, as illustrated by several tragic pre-execution cases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor and minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned prisoners have been released with a credible claim of innocence, and of the 500 and of the 500 executions, and of the 500 executions, and of the 500 executions, legal representations. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned prisoners with credible innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocence and wrongful conviction have recorded the release of one person for every seven executed. Well, one of the one of those one of those and over 500 executions since 1997. Innocence and wrongful conviction were recorded the release of one person for every seven executed. One of those proves innocence goes undiscovered. One of those proves innocence goes undiscovered. And for conviction for could release one person for every seven executed. One of those proves innocence goes undiscovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an excellent way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Taxpayers and Texas are spending an average of $2.2 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that oh my, the bottom line is that the, bot, the bottom line is that the bottom line is that the, the bottom line is that the $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line The bottom line is that the bottom line is that the million dollars, no, $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that the of dollars spent on capital punishment takes away resources of other county interests such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge the grief, but in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. One of those innocents discovered 997 innocents were wrongful conviction to release one person for every seven executed. Part of those who goes undiscovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an expensive way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Taxpayers in Texas were spending an average of $2.3 million. $2.3 million violent crime. Taxpayers in Texas are spending an average of $2.3 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that the millions of dollars spent on capital punishment takes away resources for other community interests such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. Capital punishment is not an expensive way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Taxpayers in Texas are spending an average $2.3 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that oh, the millions, the millions of dollars, the million dollars execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that the millions of dollars in capital punishment takes away resources of other community interests such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the, is the best way, and death penalty is the best way, the best. Uh, Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty or teaches ざっとが全く違わなかった。Some people believe that death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, teaches the ほんとちょっとだけ言ったの。The teaches the under the death penalty teaches that under the circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstances for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. An innocent person who has been executed can never be brought back to life. The probability of error increases with every execution, and, as illustrated by several dramatic pre-execution releases, the risk of fatal error is much greater for poor and minority defendants, the majority of whom lack adequate legal representation. Since 1977 alone, more than 70 condemned prisoners have been released due to credible claims of innocence, and of and of the of the 550, 500 and of 500 executions since 1997. Innocence and wrongful convictions have grown to the rate of one person for every seven executed. One of those whose innocence goes undiscovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an expected way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Taxpayers in Texas are spending an average of $2.3 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that $1 million spent on capital punishment takes away $1 million. The bottom line is that the million spent on capital punishment takes away resources for other community interests, such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their belief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right circumstances, killing can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstances for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution. An innocent person who has been executed can be never brought back to life. Brother Andrew Innocence, and of the 500 executions since 1997, innocence and wrongful conviction have recorded the release of one person for every seven executed. One of those whose innocence goes undiscovered. Tragically, strong evidence suggests that at least 23 people executed were innocent. Capital punishment is not an excellent way to deal with the problem of violent crime. Taxpayers in Texas are spending an average of $2.3 million on each execution, while lifetime incarceration costs from $800,000 to $1 million. The bottom line is that the millions of dollars spent on capital punishment takes away resources from other community interests, such as schools, hospitals, public safety, and jobs. Amnesty International has the deepest sympathy for the victims of violent crime and their families. Unfortunately, some people believe that the death penalty is the best way to acknowledge their grief. But in reality, the death penalty teaches that under the right circumstances, care can be acceptable. Yet there is no right circumstance for violence, especially government-sanctioned execution.